Hello, beautiful. Today, I am so excited to introduce you to our special guest. She has her PhD in social psychology, is a data enthusiast, and a science communicator. In her independent work, she investigates psychological processes that surround women's well being and sense of self with an application to real world context. Today, we will be discussing the objectification of women. Welcome, Roxanne Felig, to your Body is Not the Problem podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for that very comprehensive introduction.
To start, can you tell us a bit more about you, please, and your body image journey?
Totally. So I am recently 30 years old, which feels like
Yay!
a strange milestone because I still feel like a 22-year-old girly pop. I live in Seattle, Washington, also very recently. So I've gone through like a couple of like big life milestone changes this last year. And like you said, I have my PhD in social psychology. So for the last kind of 6 to 8 years, my personal and professional focus has been understanding women's relationships with their bodies, how the media plays a role in that, how women internalize it. And I recently came across the term, it's a portfolio career, which describes people who like have all these kind of various pieces of their career that like fit into an overarching kind of narrative rather than just like, I work as a data analyst or I do whatever. And I feel like I've really kind of in the last year latched onto this idea of having a portfolio career because the research that I do in the lab is also so aligned with my personal passions of like empowering women and educating women and kind of overcoming systemic barriers that women face. And so through social media work and independent consulting and like influencer partnerships, I kind of strive in all these different avenues of my life to be doing work that makes women's lives better. I have two cats. They are my
Oh,
children. And
what
I
are
have
their
an
names?
upstairs Harper and Mia. And I have an upstairs neighbor who stomps a ton. So if you hear anything throughout this, it is my stomper.
All good. I'm curious
So
to
that's a
know.
little bit about me.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm curious to know, is there like a defining moment in your life that propelled you onto this career path?
Totally. And I realized I didn't answer the part of your question about body image journey, and I think it overlaps. So I, starting at the age of like 4, I believe, started doing ballet. And for anyone who like has done ballet for an extended amount of time, you know that it comes with a lot of just like body image baggage. And part of it is like from my scientific perspective, part of it is the fact that you're forced to look at yourself in a mirror for hours out of the day. And also you're seeing other girls in the mirror who don't look like you, who have different body types, and you're wearing like next to nothing, like form fitting leotards and tights. So you really are forced to hyper criticize the way that your body looks, the way that your body looks in space. And then on the flip side of that is the intense negative kind of just the aura of ballet. I was constantly told by my ballet instructors that my body type wasn't right. I was asked to like talk about what I eat for lunch in front of the class. It was dissected insane, truly insane stuff. And looking back on it, I was thinking in preparation of this, like what that did to me. And I actually feel pretty like lucky in that I don't really think I internalized it. Like I never engaged in disordered eating behaviors where that's like a common outcome of women who are in the ballet world is like you have to be very thin and the only way to do that is to be restrictive. But I do think that that kind of like mindset of like being hyper focused on yourself and like seeing the downstream consequences that it could lead to was something that shaped my career because as soon as I learned about objectification of women and self objectification, I immediately recognized it as what had been happening to me for so many years as a dancer. So it just felt very relevant. And then in terms of kind of like my body image journey, I feel like having that background as a dancer and feeling like as a very young girl being incredibly aware of these pressures that women face that like I always kind of carried that with me and then as I started taking classes in college learning about like women using their bodies as acts of political resistance or to make a statement. That was when I kind of started, I would say, experimenting with like breaking social norms that are prescribed to women about how we should look. Things like shaving your legs or shaving your underarms. And I think as I progressed through my graduate studies, specifically focused on the objectification of women and learning about all of the intense harms that it can cause, I started just making like more of a conscious decision to really like investigate and interrogate the things that I did to myself, to my body, and just try to really source like why I was doing them, and to really try to deprogram some like mindset stuff that we naturally kind of are taught as women, like weight stigma, beauty standard stuff, gendered expectations for our body. So I feel like my like body image journey really came from this like point of like education almost, and using education as like a tool to resist like norms about women's like bodies and experiences, like kind of like a defiance thing. Um, and I've kind of like I've dabbled with making content about body image stuff. I always really want to be mindful of like the space that I occupy as like a thin white woman. I don't necessarily want to be like, we're going to be so body positive, because I really fit like the mold of like what's acceptable and normal. But things that I have tried to kind of push the barrier on are things that do affect me regardless of my weight, which is like body hair. I talk a lot about body hair. So that like I kind of carved out a little bit of a niche on TikTok and Instagram talking about my decision not to shave. And again, just kind of like questioning it, being like, why is it okay for a man to shave or for a man to have body hair but not for a woman? Why is it considered, like unclean and dirty on women, but not on men? Just kind of like, again, like probing, like, but why? But why? And so I would say that's kind of like an arc of my journey. It's definitely still a journey. I go back and forth all the time about like just kind of like I said, interrogating why I do certain things, and always trying to integrate the science that I know from like my work as a research psychologist into like my own personal experiences.
It's like asking ourselves why is just so powerful. And so I appreciate you sharing that so much and also find it fascinating of how your journey kind of started in ballet and then like the work you're doing now, because in my brain there are certain like sports and activities that I find it hard to believe that people can come out of without having struggles with their body image or eating disorders. So one, I'm really happy that you were
Yeah,
able to come out of ballet not with that but with that curiosity of like, why are you asking me what I'm eating in a ballet class? Like, why
totally.
aren't we
When I'm
dancing?
11, when
Yeah,
I'm like 11 years old. I agree. And I think like it gets into an important conversation that I don't think we can have today, but I was thinking about it as I was looking through your questions of like when we talk about things like objectification, which we'll get into more of like if anyone's listening, they're like, I still don't know what that is. We'll talk about it. But one thing that I want to like preface in all this conversation is when I talk about things like self-objectification in women, there are what we call trait level factors. So, like the inherent level that a woman tends to think about her appearance. So, like, you could take a survey right now that measures like your kind of baseline level of self objectification, but it's also something that can be influenced by the situation that you're in. So, something like looking in a mirror or having someone catcall you can increase your in the moment level of self objectification. So, I think that like perhaps I'm pretty low on like baseline self objectification, but I experienced all these routine instances of it that like impacted me in the moment, but luckily didn't have too intense of like a downstream consequence. Whereas if there's someone who's like already very high in that tendency and is really fixated on how they look and their body, that being in that environment can just create this downward spiral for them where it's all they think about.
for sure. So, what is objectification and self-objectification? I know for myself, I like was self-objectifying, was objectified. I think many of us are, but
Totally.
I didn't know what
Yeah.
the words meant and like
Yeah.
didn't have a term for it until I entered the body image world. So if you could
Yeah.
share what it is, please, and some examples that like we might be objectifying ourselves without even realizing it, that would be very appreciated, please.
Absolutely. I do think it's like kind of gotten some mainstream attention. Like I feel like if you talk about sexual objectification, someone will have they'll be able to pinpoint like possibly an example of it. But what I think is so fascinating and also horrifying is like it's quite literally everywhere. So in its simplest form, I would say that objectification is treating a person like a thing. So it is making someone an object. It happens when someone's reduced to their body, to their appearance, to the role that they can provide for someone else. When someone is treated as kind of a tool or a means to an end, rather than being recognized as a whole person who has thoughts and feelings and emotions and agency. So in the research world, we often distinguish between objectification that you do someone else versus self-objectification, which is when we begin to adopt or internalize that perspective of ourselves as object-like. And I think a really important like component of this that I hear this a lot when I talk about my research online. People think that self-objectification is about like vanity or being kind of focused on how you look. It is focused on how you look, but it's not driven by vanity, it's driven by mental attention. So when your brain is constantly programmed to monitor how you look from an outsider's perspective, there is cognitive bandwidth that you're not able to access in return. You aren't as present, you aren't as creative, you aren't as confident or engaged. So it's actually like shrinking your human experience, not just being vain. And I think that's like such an important tidbit for people to gather from this. So in terms of examples, I would say a really good example of objectification around us or objectifying someone is to immediately comment on someone's body or their appearance before anything else about them. Another kind of broader example is like media advertisements that often rely on kind of dismembered or fragmented female body parts to sell a product, like quite literally treating women as like an object to just make a sale. If we're talking about self-objectification, some examples would be if you are maybe at the beach and instead of enjoying water or hanging out with your friends, all you're thinking about is how you look from someone else. If you're sitting in a position that's like flattering, really putting the focus of your experience onto what you look like and thinking about how others are perceiving you. Um, Something that is relevant to right now that I wrote a blog post about a couple years back is when you're in a Zoom call and you're like constantly fixated on your little square and how you look rather than like the meeting that you're in or the class that you might be taking. And it involves kind of like adjusting your appearance, anticipating how others are thinking about you, and just being taken out of the moment.
Mm-hmm. Is I think for myself, when I think of objectification, I think I often blur it with sexualization.
Yeah,
So I'm curious how much of a difference, like, is objectification, it's obviously not always sexualization, but like, how often do they
right.
overlap?
They overlap a lot when we're talking about women. So a lot of times in the research, what we'll do is we'll to trigger objectification, we will show a woman in a sexualized way, knowing that people will often
Oh.
objectify her. So we'll design studies where maybe we show the same woman and she's either in revealing clothing and kind of a sexualized posture or shown in a less revealing way. And then we'll measure the extent to which someone is objectifying her by asking them to kind of rate her on a series of traits that are indicative of being a human versus being an object. And we find that sexualization is a pathway to objectification. But I think a good kind of contextualized maybe like comparison is when we talk about objectification, it comes up a lot in literature related to like workers. So the way that companies and like manufacturers will exploit human labor in a very objectified way. They see a person as a tool to complete a task, a means to an end, interchangeable with someone else that can do the same skill. So objectification does not always have to be sexual, and it it isn't always sexual, but when I am studying it, it pretty much is because I'm always studying it in the context of women.
That makes sense. How does objectification hurt us as individuals and as a society? And are there any ways in which it benefits us?
This is a really good question. So, what I said earlier about self-objectification kind of narrowing our human experience, I think like fundamentally that is the biggest harm. So it hurts us because it reduces the humanity that we see in others and also the humanity that we see in ourselves. And I think like when I said that, the more I think about this, the more I realize it's everywhere and how horrible it is. Like this is what I mean. Like that is such a fundamental harm, like to not see someone as fully human. And I could point to some kind of specific manifestations of that, but I think it's like it's a huge umbrella that results in so many different downstream consequences. If we're talking about interpersonal objectification, so if like a man objectifies a woman, or if the media as a whole objectifies a certain group of people, we find that objectification of someone is associated with feeling reduced empathy toward them. And again, this comes back to, if you think about it very like in its most extreme, objectification is seeing someone as less than human and more than object, more as an object. So if you think about someone as an object, you know, objects don't feel, objects don't have sensation, they don't have brains, right? So kind of all the things that you would project onto an object, you're instead projecting onto this person who can feel pain and who can suffer. So there's like this disconnect that happens. In some of my own research, we found that when women are objectified by being shown in a sexualized way, they're seen as less capable of experiencing pain and suffering. I investigated this in a context of domestic violence where people read a police report about a woman who was allegedly thrown against a wall, had visible signs of bruising. And we asked, you know, how much pain do you think she'll feel from this? How long do you think it'll take her to recover? We also asked how responsible the perpetrator was for the violence committed against her. And all we did was manipulate the way that the woman was shown in the study at a photo of a sexualized woman or not. And what we found was that when she was shown in a sexualized way, people rated her as less likely to experience pain and suffering. And it was explained by the fact that they were perceiving her as literally object like. So this kind of perception of someone as a literal unfeeling thing has all of these downstream consequences. We replicated that type of paradigm looking at online sexual harassment. So instead of a physical violence situation, more of kind of an emotional damage instance where a woman received non-consensual intimate images from someone and was asked to send nudes of herself back. And we asked how upsetting the situation was, all kinds of things that tap into kind of emotional feeling. And again, we found that a sexualized woman was seen as not being as bothered or concerned by the instances because she was seen as an object. So I also find that women internalize this kind of legitimately object-like perception. We find that women who tend to self-objectify more have a harder time noticing their internal bodily state. So we looked at this in the context of women out on cold nights, and we found that women who were higher in self-objectification felt less cold when they should, in fact, feel very cold. They also report, in general, a less stable sense of who they are. They have an unclear sense of self. So their identity in general tends to become more contingent on external validation, external rules to kind of guide who they are and what they're feeling. So it's just like it creates this full disconnect from the body, from how they feel. Are they cold? Are they whatever? And their internal sense of who they are. And it has a lot of ripple effects. So when we spend so much energy monitoring our appearance, like I said earlier, there's just less cognitive capacity for everything else. Research has shown that self-objectification impairs attention and cognitive performance, which has impacts for like girls in STEM fields or girls in school in general, but like we see it specifically in STEM contexts. As I talked about with ballet, it leads to disordered eating. It's a downstream or it's a predictor for downstream sexual dysfunction. women who are higher in self-objectification often undergo risky cosmetic procedures to kind of meet an idealized beauty standard. So it has like all of these different downstream harms. But I think at its core, it if I had to like distill it into a soundbite, it hurts women because it refocuses their life away from their internal sense of self. It really narrows our humanity of ourselves and other people. Your question though about is there a way in which objectification benefits us? I think is really interesting. And I do have one specific example. I would still be wary to say that like it's an example of objectification being good rather than like us harnessing objectification to like have a more positive outcome. So I have a PhD colleague from my time at USF named Dr. Emily Courtney, and she studies objectification, and she also studies breast cancer behaviors in women. And she has termed this coin, coined this term. She has coined this term adaptive self-objectification.
Oh.
And she uses it specifically in the context of health related behaviors. For example, conducting a breast self exam. A lot of women can feel anxiety over things related to like thinking about our own mortality, like screening for cancer. And so she found that if women can objectify these body parts in a way that kind of strips them from their meaning and like kind of seeing your breasts as like literal objects and seeing yourself as a literal object, it helps women overcome the barrier of fear and anxiety associated with body related behaviors. So women are more likely to engage in breast self exams and other like cancer related behaviors associated with the body when they can desexualize and like literally objectify a part of them. And I think that's like very cool. It's kind of like, okay, we navigate objectification anyway. Let's like figure out a way that this could maybe like help us navigate our lives as women. So yeah, she frames this adaptive self-objectification as a way to overcome fears associated with thinking about the breasts and breast cancer, because you strip it away from like being a part of you. And that is truly the only instance of like positive self-objectification that I can think of.
That's fascinating.
Yeah,
And
you should have her on next. Honestly, she does really cool work with like women's bodies, especially being perceived as creaturely. This is like a tangent, but like women's bodies more so than men are associated with thoughts of death. If you've seen the Barbie movie, this is like big overlap with Barbie movie because women play such a distinct role in reproduction. Like we have visible markers that like remind us of like bringing life into the world, and we also for that reason serve as mortality reminders. And so she did some really cool work on how like women's bodies prime these thoughts of death and then like how we can use that to our advantage, like the breast cancer stuff.
I did read your paper today on life and plastic, not so fantastic.
Yeah, the Barbie chapter.
And I was horrified of death for
Mm,
so long and objectified myself so much. So like the connection is fascinating.
totally,
It's all so interesting.
totally. That
Um,
I'm glad that you found that chapter. That is like I'm so proud of it. Just like a Barbie themed book chapter. Like, yes.
it's really good. And I will be linking it in the show notes. So if you're like, what are you guys talking about? Scroll down, it will be
Awesome.
there. One of the
Awesome.
things I was thinking about when it comes to objectification was I was thinking about road rage. And I don't know if this is like
Yeah.
a true example or not, but I was thinking about how it's like you're getting so angry because a car cut you off or whatever it may
Ooh,
be. And it's like you're not seeing the humans driving the car. And so it's like whenever
interesting.
someone like cuts me off or whatever, I'm like, they have to go to the bathroom really bad. And I bring it back to like, who's the
Right.
person driving?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I always kind of keep up with the newest literature, and I've been seeing a lot of publications recently. I haven't read them fully, but about like AI, like delivery robots for like food service stuff, and how the presence of delivery robots is shaping people's perception of food service workers, like the actual people.
Oh,
And so like maybe an interesting kind of parallel situation happening there.
yeah. What are some steps that we can take in terms of not objectifying ourselves and others?
It's a good question. It's kind of hard. It's hard because this is such a broad systemic problem,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard to like tell someone like an individual cure to something that is just like everywhere around us. Um, but if we go back to the fact that objectification narrows our attention to appearance and how like thinking about others in terms of what they can do for us, I think that the antidote is to deliberately widen our attention and to always be considering people's thoughts, experiences, their values, really focusing on their humanity. I don't think that the goal is to never think about appearance because that's just unrealistic. Like we are visual creatures, we see everything that really shapes our experiences. But I think the goal is to stop making appearance the primary lens that we're evaluating our worth and other people's worth through. For ourselves, in terms of self objectification, one of the biggest shifts is moving from away from thinking about how we look and really thinking about like how do we feel, how does this experience make me feel, how do I feel when I'm with this person. If we're talking about like body appreciation, it's like if you're taking a workout class, is it, is it because it's punishment? Is it because you think you need to look a certain way? Or is it because the workout makes you feel good and you feel accomplished after and you feel strong? I think really like reframing what an experience can give us and focusing on like how we feel it is very helpful. So I think it's really about like trying to very intentionally inhabit your body. And for other people that we interact with, I think it's about curiosity and trying to see their humanity. And I think it's very hard, especially in like a digital world where we like the humanity is stripped from us when we're on social media. It's so easy to leave a nasty comment to someone. And I think part of that is like you don't see them as a full person. You see them as an influencer or you see them as, content creators that like post recipes and you don't like the recipe, so you're gonna leave a rude comment. Well, let's like step back. Like there's a person behind that page. They spent time making this content. Like, is that necessary? So I think just really like trying to get out of this mindset that is being pushed on us by like the algorithm and social media that like everyone is a commodity rather than like everyone is a human. So I wish there was like a
It,
magic cure, but I fear
yeah.
there is not.
It feels almost like one of those like cycles of you're not like you're treating yourself as an object, so you don't necessarily know how you feel, and you're not seeing other people as humans, and it's just like
Yeah, it reinforces itself.
it just keeps reinforcing itself with, and
Totally.
everything that we keep
And
seeing from everywhere is continuing to push us to think that way too.
yeah, I think of it like a domino effect, like
Yeah.
self-objectification or objectification, bam, self-objectification, bam, objectification. Like, but I think another thing to consider is that self-objectification is like the response. Like without a culture of objectification, we wouldn't be as prone to self-objectifying. And so I think really trying to be aware of like the sources of objectification in your life, calling them out. Like if someone said something or if you see something like, I don't get it, explain it to me. What are you trying to convey when you show like a woman's body as like a table in an ad? Like what does that mean? Like, you know? Um, and like really trying to make this like a group effort of questioning and removing sources of objectification.
It's making me think of in the paper that I was reading today, The Life in Plastic Not So Fantastic, and also what you were
Yeah.
saying earlier of how sometimes we objectify others by the first comment we make about them is about their body. And with my next question, it's what would you say are the impacts that gender roles play in self objectification of
Mm.
women? And it was making me think about how I hear so often that like someone will give birth and the first thing that they hear is like, you look so good that you just gave birth and you look so good. I'm like,
Yeah.
why is the first thing
Hello.
you're talking about is my body? What?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, how about how do I feel? Like, do you need any
Yeah.
help?
Yeah. Are you okay? What's going on? Like you just become a parent. Let's talk about, yeah, no, totally. It's kind of related, but I was thinking about this. I was recently in a store looking at cards, like greeting cards, and I noticed that like there were no like celebratory cards for anything besides like buying a house, having a baby, getting married. And I'm like, what about like promotion? What about just like congratulations on your achievement? Or like there was like nothing, especially for women. Like it, I, I feel like the cards that I saw that were like congrats on your, the very few on like congrats on your new job thing were like masculine coded cards. I'm like, we never just like celebrate women's intellect or capacity or like solo experiences. Hello,
Mm-hmm.
like we are full people with like a full range of lived experiences. And yeah, the way that it's like portrayed in or reinforced just through conversation and like cards, the things that you can get someone to celebrate, like all of these little things add up to like build this house of gender roles, basically.
So is self-objectification something that mainly only women experience, or do men also experience it and also like non-binary people?
Yeah, so anyone who can self-objectify, men definitely experience it. Appearance pressures that men experience are typically related to like strength and muscularity. There are definitely like body ideals projected onto men. Like I think if you pick up a magazine, you'll see that, right? Like again, there's kind of an ideal body type, and men certainly start to evaluate themselves through that lens. And I think for men especially, like the way that they're valued is like stereotypically is through what they can provide and kind of how they can, support if we're talking about like a traditional family unit, like can they provide financially, can they provide a home, blah blah blah. I specifically focus on the objectification of women simply because it's my research niche. There are people who explicitly study objectification of men. But when we talk about like sexual objectification in the media, it's something that pretty like predominantly has impacted women. The original theory of objectification theory was framed around understanding women's lived experiences, and it's since been expanded to include men and gender expansive people. But I think one reason that it shapes women's experiences differently is coming back to this idea of gender roles. Because if you think about just historically expectations that society has kind of imposed on men and women for how they should look, how they should behave, how they should contribute. Women's roles have always been, well, not always, but in a Western sense, as of like recent history, have been tied more strongly to being looked at, being desired, being valued for their bodies. Women have been denied political and economic power. They've been expected to marry, have children, prioritize caregiving. It's kind of this like be seen and not heard, which is literally objectification, like being there to reproduce, not having any actual influence over politics or the economy, and being a pretty thing to look at. Like it makes complete and total sense that we see women self-objectify more than men because it's just this predictable psychological response to living in an environment where you are told that your value is to sit there and to be quiet and to have kids. Again, men and people of other genders also can internalize this. Like if you are navigating a world that's telling you how you should look and what we should value, people definitely can be influenced by that appearance based pressure. But I think where gender differences often emerge is the content of the messages kind of being fed to them and the context of the pressures. So again, since women's kind of historical social value has been tied to their appearance, they're kind of the primary focus of objectification research in that way. But I will say there's a lot of cool kind of current research coming out on like trans women's experiences with objectification. And it's so different than cis women, especially if you've gone through like a public transition. So there's a lot of really, really cool work looking at this because fundamentally, again, it's like coming back to treating someone as less than human. And there's so much intersection with that, especially when you start to get into like gender nonconforming people and trans people, where like they're already experiencing dehumanization. So then you add in this other lens of like objectification, dehumanization, and it's a completely different context that it exists in.
Hmm. I will sometimes see um like a TikTok and it will be women like commenting on a man's body and like openly just like making them solely just their body. And I'm
Uh-huh.
like, if we flip it around, that doesn't feel great, right? And so I just find it interesting. Like, that's one of the ways in which I have seen like people objectify
Totally.
men's bodies.
So I was thinking about this recently because were you getting fed all of the catching prank content?
I don't
Are
think
you
so.
familiar with this? Okay. This guy, I think his name is Anwar, made this video. He's a gay man, and he was talking about he was responding to someone's video that was like, if only there was a way for us to know how big a guy's dick is before we sleep with him. And this guy Anwar was like, ladies, let me teach you how to catch print, which is something that gay men have been doing forever, which is like how to like look at a guy's pants and like figure out based on like the print how big it is. And he was like going through his method. He's like, this is like a tried and true method. You can like categorize men like A, B, D, something like that. And women started like they started using it to their advantage because I mean this is something that men do to us all the time. They're like, oh, she's a whatever, she's a 10, she's not, whatever, whatever.
Hmm.
And so women were like in men's comment sections, like, oh, A spotted, B spotted. And men are like, this is so dehumanizing. This is so objectifying. And I will push back because I feel like it is, but it isn't systemic. Like it's
Mm.
women are learning how to create a system to preemptively determine a man's package. Okay. Um, it's very similar to what men do to us, but we're not basing our entire worth of the man on it. And I think that's where the objectification comes into it, is if you are treating someone's appearance as the only thing that gives them value.
Hmm.
And so, but men were pointing out like, why are you only focused on my sexual aspects? And women are like, you mean that the way that you treat us all the time? You mean that women constantly navigate the world around them? Like, yeah. Do you not like it? Does it make you feel self conscious? Like, you know, it was really interesting. But I think because I was going to make a video about it. I was like, is this objectification? Is it not? Like, it is focusing on a man's sexual part, but
Hmm.
not in a way that like reduced them to simply like it wasn't like men with A's are unworthy. Men with it's like here's just how you know. And I think a lot of it also comes down to the fact that women typically, when they have sex with men, don't experience pleasure. And if there's a way for them to like know ahead of time, is this going to be worth my time? Like, am I going to have a nice time? Like, maybe that's working smarter, not harder. I don't know. I had a lot of thoughts about it because I think it comes down to like a power dynamic thing too. Like when
Hmm.
men objectify women, it's so systemic. It happens in the workplace, at school, in public office. It happens in every kind of avenue that impacts women's lives. And I just don't know if it's the same when the script is flipped.
I think that is this also bringing up my next question too, but um because I'm assuming that a lot of the scenarios where these women would be um figuring out the size of the man would be in non-sexual scenarios,
Yeah.
right? So like it might just be, I mean, I think there was a comment, we were watching soccer the other day, and there was a comment of like just the guy walking off of the field and you could see. And it's like that's not a sexual
Yeah.
scenario. That's just him
Yeah.
walking. Right? And so it's like when does something become sexual? But so I have come across this artist on TikTok. I think she's 18 or 19. And she's doing a series titled Dirty Minded, which I'm obsessed with the title. She was explaining that someone will be like, oh, that's such a sexual painting. And her response is, or are you just dirty minded? She creates paintings of women doing ordinary things that commonly get sexualized, even though there is nothing inherently sexual about them. She puts forth the question about what type of context actually makes something sexualized. It made me think about how I have felt like if I wear a v-neck or whatever it may be, that like my chest being more visible is more sexual, even though I know that's not true. Because I can bring it back to it's like it's just a chest. Like
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
just it. It makes me think of like another TikTok sound was like, am I showing off my boobs or do I just have boobs and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
exist?
Yeah.
So it's like when does something actually become sexualized and then I guess turn into objectification?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think it's a misconception that we often have that like something about a woman's body or behavior is inherently sexual. And similar to what you're saying with like wearing a v-neck, I think so many of us have had this experience of feeling like our body or a body part of ours becomes sexual just because it's visible. But I do like, unless we're literally talking about like sex, there's very little I think that's inherently sexual. It's just how we've learned to interpret women's bodies. So an example I'll give is some research that I started my first year of grad school. I had this almost like exact question as I joined my PhD advisor's lab. I was like, I was just like kind of, I was trying to tease it apart. I was like, what exactly is sexual objectification and why is it happening? And are we saying that if like in our studies when we show a woman in a sexualized way or a non-sexualized way and then find that participants like treat her really terribly if she's wearing revealing clothing, are we saying that the cure is for women to like not dress that way? Like what exactly is happening? So I developed and conducted a study my first year. This hasn't been published, but there's other research that's found a similar pattern of results. If you show the same exact woman with the same photo, identical, and you ask half of your participants to focus on her sexual features and like think about her body, and the other half to focus on her personality and what she's like as a person, you'll find that they objectify and sexualize her differently. So it's not about how she looks. It's not about what she's wearing. It is at least in large part due to what's being projected onto her mentally. If you are thinking about her in a sexual way, that's how you're going to see her. And like not to get very grim, but like people are targets of sexual violence when they're wearing baggy jeans and like fully covered. Like we know that people will see and can see women as like sexualized objects regardless of how they look. And that's what they're projecting onto her. It's nothing inherent about what she looks like. So I think it's really important to think about that because a woman's body isn't simply sexual, like because her chest is visible or because her breasts are larger than someone else's, or because she moves in a certain way. We're just bodies existing in the world, and sexualization happens when we impose a sexual meaning onto that body. And I think like tying it all back to self-objectification, it's when people, typically men, see a woman as like being able to fulfill a sexual desire of theirs, and like that's it. Like if you see a woman as like lacking her own personal boundaries and her own personal experience and agency and like not thinking about consent or anything and just being like, I'd really like to have sex with that woman, or like she could really make me feel good, like that's when it happens.
Right.
So yeah.
So it sounds like it comes back to seeing people as humans. Like we have
Yeah, and I
feelings,
mean,
we're not objects.
and I think like a good way also to like explore this is like queer women also are attracted to women and don't tend to objectify them in the same way. Like you can be attracted to someone without objectifying them. Or like if we talk about like pole dancers, I follow a lot of pole dancers on Instagram, and it's like something that people perceive as sexual because there's a lot of body exposed, and but they see it as like a competence based sport.
Mhm.
I think about the way that people are perceiving it. And when you think about, I don't know, this question is like so interesting to me because like men's chests aren't sexualized. And like you see a man topless and he's running, you're like, wow, what an athlete. But if a woman is like wearing a sports bra, she's a slut. Like it's clearly something about how women's bodies are perceived rather than like the body itself. Like a chest isn't sexualized. We've just made women's chest sexualized. And if you, I think we talked about it in the Life in Plastic, Not So Fantastic, of like objectification is often a way to quell thoughts and anxieties associated with death. And like women, as I said earlier, play like a very specific role in like childbirth. And one of the components is breastfeeding. Like breasts are not just a sexual reproductive organ for women. They like are involved in like bringing life into the world, and so they also serve as a reminder of death, especially then when you talk about like breast cancer, like my friend's research. So like sexually objectifying them is a mechanism to overcome those fears and anxieties about death, which is just a whole
Mhm.
other long-winded thing. But I think it's just like there's definitely something specific about women. I don't think that it's because those body parts are inherently sexual, and we do a fine job of not sexually objectifying men for showing off their chest.
Yeah. Honestly, I think I blame a lot of mine on the Catholic high school I went to, and just like in
Oh,
general when going to Catholic school. And
totally.
I'm not Catholic, but I was in Catholic school my entire time in school.
That's rough.
And it's like shoulders are inappropriate, like
Yeah. I was thinking
so
about dress
much.
codes recently, just in general. Like, I remember being dress coded because, like, my shorts were too short. And I'm like, well, I can't find longer shorts. Go look in the girls section. Like, it's just because of the length of my legs. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah,
that's
the
definitely
fact that the shorts had to go down to your end of your fingertips.
yeah, yeah. I'm like, well, I didn't make them. How am I supposed to just find a pair? Yeah, crazy.
But also though, like that extra 2 inches of skin. It's just skin. It's not sexual.
Right, right. And that's something where like we're at this very young age that our bodies as girls is distracting to other people, right? So like we get sent these messages that like our body is a problem. It's a problem for men. Boys learn simultaneously, oh, if I see more of a woman's skin, it's a problem, or like it's I'm not supposed to see it, it's risque, right? It's this it sends messages to both girls and boys that we grow up
Mm-hmm.
with.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for everything you have shared. It's honestly, I mean, it's frustrating that we're all experiencing objectification, but it's also fascinating. And I
Yeah.
think that's when you get to learn about this stuff, that's when we can say why. That's when we can start actually questioning the things that we're doing, the things that we're thinking, even the way that we're objectifying other people. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it's just a very powerful lesson to learn and to understand
Yeah.
fully. So I really appreciate your time and sharing it with us. To close out, I have 2 questions that I ask all of my guests. The first one is, what do you wish you could go back and tell younger Roxanne?
I had a hard time with this, but I have landed on telling my younger self that even though I'm 30, I am still listening to Hillary Duff, and I'm going to see her this week. I was obsessed with
I'm
Hillary
so
Duff when I was a
jealous.
kid. She was my first concert, and I'm going to see her this week. And also, I would tell her to never stop being silly. So those are my
I love that
messages to
so
younger me.
much. That's so good. And
Yeah.
also have so much fun at Hillary
Oh my
Duff.
God, I'm so excited. Wait, hold on. Can I show you something? Wait, let me find
Yeah.
this. This is so funny. I just got my t-shirt that I'm gonna wear to the concert, and I don't know if you've listened to her new album. But in the first song, she says that she's an amateur psychologist, which I thought was so funny because I'm a psychologist. So I have my amateur psychologist
Oh,
Lizzie McGuire shirt that I'm gonna wear because it just felt very
that's so
perfect for me.
good. Oh,
Yeah.
I love it.
So
Second question is, what advice would you give to someone who's just starting out trying to learn to love their body more?
I would say like the most tangible and um practical like step to take with immediate results is to curate your Instagram feed. Because so much of the messaging that we get about bodies comes from social media. And I don't think that everyone knows that you can like kind of change your algorithm. So you can actually like go into the back end of your settings and like indicate what topics you want to see more or less of. Get rid of dieting ads, get rid of weight loss stuff. Don't see that if you don't have to. Follow people who challenge your ideals of beauty standards so that you see like broader diversity in your feed. And unfollow or mute people who, when they post, it makes you feel self-conscious about your body. I know there are like tons of creators, I really like what they say, but like if I see them too much, it does make me like fall into the social comparison trap. And so I think that's like a really like tangible like thing you could do like right now is just go in and like mess with your Instagram settings so that you have a more positive experience on the app.
I love it. And it's like when so many of us are on the apps so long
Yeah.
every single day, it's so important.
Yeah.
Thank you again so much for being here. I am looking forward to re-listening to this so many times and to dive even further into your research because it is fascinating. Where is the best place for the listener to come and find you on social media that they're going to clean up?
Yeah. Best place is Instagram where I'm Roxanne underscore Naya, Naia. And then I have a website that is also linked in like my link tree that you can find on my Instagram where you can find all of the PDFs of my research if you want to read anything directly. And I also just launched a Substack called The Feminist Frame, where you can also find my ramblings on all things social media and pop culture and feminism.
Amazing. And I will be linking all of those in the show notes below. So again, you can just scroll down and then click on whichever link you would like to start with first. But again, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Of course. And until next time, your body is not the problem.